Now to new concerns over a presidential doomsday book. In a new Time magazine article, former Trump White House advisors are sounding an alarm about the dangers of Donald Trump in a potential second term, having access to extraordinary emergency powers. Those powers include suspending habeas corpus, which gives anyone arrested the right to appear before a judge or secure bail, putting parts of the country under military control, imposing martial law, blocking Americans from traveling overseas, and restricting telecommunications. Joining me now, Brian Bennett, author of this article and Time Magazine senior White House correspondent. Brian, welcome. I understand that you interviewed more than a dozen national security officials from current and previous administrations. That includes 5 of them being from Donald Trump's. Tell us what you found out about the Doomsday book and what's in it.
So we talked about the Doomsday Book, particularly people who had worked for Donald Trump in the national security arena when he was president. They're concerned about him learning the specifics of the extraordinary presidential powers that are available to him under extreme circumstances, like the event of a major catastrophe, a nuclear attack, for example. And these powers are outlined in a secret book inside the White House that's known as the Doomsday Book. The technical term for it is the Presidential Emergency Action Documents. And it's a stack of papers that's kept in a secure location on the White House grounds. And what it does is it's taken 40 years of legal review and legal opinions to look at what powers does a president have based on the Constitution and laws that have been passed to keep the government going under extreme circumstances like Congress gets completely wiped out or there's a nuclear attack on a major American city. And there's concern that Trump, if he becomes president again, would exaggerate a catastrophe and try to turn to these powers in order to extract revenge against rivals or exercise presidential power in an extraordinary and unusual way.
And you also wrote, Brian, that when Trump was in office, his national security staff worked to keep him from learning the full extent of these interpretations of presidential authority. They were concerned that he would abuse them then, let alone what could come. Who was involved in this effort? I'm just curious, who was like, we've got to keep these details from Trump? And what was their biggest concern about him?
So as I said, I talked to about 5 people who had worked closely with Trump on his national security staff in the White House. And they had said that they had intentionally tried to make sure that Trump wasn't briefed on these particular powers that are to be used in the event of a nuclear attack or for continuity of government. So I spoke with Mark Harvey, for example. Mark Harvey was a career official on Trump's NSC. He was in charge of resiliency policy at the NSC, which is thinking about how the country could move through such a devastating attack. And he actively tried to prevent other officials from letting Trump know exactly what powers would be available to him under circumstances like that, because he was nervous that Trump would exaggerate a situation and use that. And there were others that joined him, and they even tried to block people who were seen as MAGA loyalists or Trump loyalists who might try to do an end run around the system to get briefings to Trump to let him know what was in those documents.
Yeah, I noted you also spoke with Miles Taylor, with whom I'll be speaking about this very thing tomorrow. He, again, had been the chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security at the time in the Trump administration. So Trump's rhetoric around using the military to go after his perceived enemies, that has really intensified in recent weeks. Do you get this sense, Brian, that he's aware now of what's in the Doomsday book?
So talking to people who had worked with him and are still in touch with aides to Trump, I say that Trump's inner circle is aware of what's in the Doomsday Book and the extent of these powers, and that's made them, increasingly alarmed that it's one of the things that Trump could turn to when he becomes president. I mean, Trump himself, of course, has said he wants to be a dictator on day one in order to close the border and to expand oil drilling. He also has said vindictive things about his political enemies that he wants, and then amplified messages that he wants to put them in jail. And so these are a menu of options that the president could turn to. It would require him, exaggerating and bending the truth about what's happening in the country in order to use them. But it's something that people who have worked closely with him are concerned that he could use.
It is an extraordinary article in Time magazine, everyone. It also delves into the way Congress is looking at all of this, and they've got a lot of questions and concerns. So I suggest people read it. Brian Bennett, well written and well discussed. Thank you so much. Breaking news, what we know about the power grid failure that left the entire country of Cuba in the dark.